Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Get Stuff Done podcast. I'm Gordon Dudley, your host, and I'm thrilled to be joined once again by another fantastic guest. Today, I'm joined by Charles Ferguson. He is currently the head of Asia for Globalization Partners. If you haven't heard of them, they are a human resource service that helps businesses to hire anywhere within just a few business days. And he has actually had a very extensive career through a number of high-profile firms. In fact, if you read his early career, it looks like he was skipping between the best tech firms in the world, including Intel, SAP, Microsoft, to name but a few. He's also founded his own firm and went on to sell it. And now he is based in Melbourne, Australia. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for a while now through his current role. And so I am really excited to be able to have a chat with him because from my first meeting with him, it was very clear that he has a really great perspective on people management, and relationships. And so I'm looking forward to this chat with Charles. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Gordon, thank you, and what a warm and lovely welcome. I'm humbled and flattered by the accolades, and I look forward to sharing some thoughts with you and learning with you through the conversation.
That sounds great. So, as we always do on the Get Stuff Done podcast, we like to delve into a little bit of the background of the career of the guest, and we also then tap into what their personal take is on getting stuff done. So, first of all, tell me a little bit about your current role and what you're doing at Globalization Partners.
Sure. So, Gordon, the company has been, in existence for over 12 years, and in that time, operating in the Asia Pacific region for probably, I reckon, like 9 or 10 of those years. So, very early on, the business started to flourish in the region. But I give you that detail because of the fact that originally GP was a very U.S.-centric business. So, a lot of the sort of success that they enjoyed early on and even today is United States-based businesses expanding abroad. And one of the key areas of landing, obviously, was Asia-Pacific region. I was brought on board to kind of flip that lens and look at the Asia-Pacific region as an organic opportunity and look at how we could scale that business both intra-regionally, so, Korea to Australia as an example, but also extra-regionally. So looking at how Asia-Pacific businesses could tap into the opportunity inherent in going further afield, further abroad, United States, Europe, et cetera. So my role as GM of the region is to facilitate kind of building that team and that infrastructure to accelerate the scale for our business, but for the clients that we serve. And the unique piece of it, in my view, is that aside from all the great businesses that we're able to help, we're really this will sound disingenuous when I say it, but I'm quite serious about it. We're opening up opportunities for talent all over the world as well. So, to remove the constraints of borders, to allow great talent to be discovered and, put onto a platform to get them hired, regardless of where they are, is a cool gig. I love it.
Right. So that kind of global mobility facilitation comes both directly and indirectly by enabling companies to expand globally. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly for that reason that we have had a chance to work together.
That's right.
Which I think is great. But originally coming from the US, when did you first have a global aspect to your career? Or when was it that you first kind of went overseas for work?
That's an interesting question. If I look back on my kind of trajectory, I'm a mountain farm boy from North Georgia, from the Appalachian Mountains.
Okay.
For folks, who are watching this or listening to this for the first time, who might not be that familiar, it's a very there's a trail that runs from North Georgia all the way up to the border of Canada on the east coast of the United States called the Appalachian Trail. And
there's a famous song about it, isn't there? I think.
Yeah, it's an incredible. It's gorgeous. Yeah. It's an unbelievable place. The beginning of that trail is about 7 miles from my mom's farm, right in North Georgia. So by happenstance, by kind of the vagaries of life, I started traveling with my father when I was very, very young. I did my middle school and high school in Indonesia, and then went back to the United States for university. Once I graduated from my first 2 years of uni, I went immediately, basically, back into the region where I'd kind of come of age here in Asia Pacific, and
Okay.
I got a job with Intel corporation that ultimately had me, from a work perspective, really relocate to Singapore and then on to Shanghai with that company. And
Got it.
it just blossomed from there, all over the region.
And did you feel that your early experiences of being overseas, being exposed to new cultures, made influence your choice significantly, or was it, what was it that kind of drew you to return for work purposes?
Yeah, look, it's a conundrum. I think that a lot of people, particularly these days, where a lot more individuals around the world are exposed, right, to multiple cultures or multiple points of view. I'm not saying all are, but certainly on average, when I was coming up, I'm 50 years old. So when I was, a much younger man, there were far fewer people who would have that sort of global perspective or
Right,
be apprised of things happening outside of their own backyard.
right,
Today,
right.
certainly many more people are exposed to these types of things. I think that for me personally, that sort of choice that I was exposed to as a kid to have
Hmm.
different points of view really impacted me and influenced me to crave that a little bit more. It was something that was almost like an itch, it was an insatiable sort of desire to constantly be wanting to hear another point of view or look at something
Right.
through one more degree of variance just to make sure that I was getting the full picture. And I think that, the kids today, I sound like one of these old men, those kids today, the kids today have such power of ability to be exposed by virtue of the internet.
Yep.
When I was coming up as a really young kid, I remember my dad giving me a shortwave radio, and this was, this
Be
device
careful.
for,
You're
yeah,
aging. You're really aging yourself there, Charles.
yeah, I know, man. But with for all the kids who are listening out there, this was
Subtitle:
a
What is a shortwave radio?
that's exactly right. But it was so fascinating because you could be dialing through these radio stations across these frequencies, and you'd pick up something like Chinese, or
Yep.
you would
Yep.
hear French, and you'd be like, my God, that's amazing. And I think
Yep.
that the ability for that sort of foreign information to elicit curiosity
Yep.
was something that really, really inspired me. And so, today I try to continue to provide opportunities to fuel that curiosity, both for myself, but certainly for my family now as well. Right? I think it's
Yeah.
really, really important. It ultimately, Gordon, sets the table for one of the most critical skills I think that anyone could have as a leader, which is the
Hmm.
ability to express empathy. It's first thinking about the experience of someone else.
Yep.
That's the first step towards developing that muscle of empathy, and
For sure.
that's fueled by curiosity, right? Curiosity about somebody else's life, curiosity about someone else's experience.
Yep.
I think it's very powerful.
For sure. I think we've grown up in very different places and had very different paths, but mindset, we're so similar. You've touched on so many elements there. For me, also very similar. At a young age, my family moved to Germany, and I
There you
remember
go.
thinking from a really young age, wow, they all speak German, I speak English, and there's other languages. If everyone could speak every language in the world, we could just communicate with everyone. Wouldn't that be great? I remember, let's hope technology gets that, in the near future, where we can be talking one language and any other language can come out the other side. That would be fantastic.
Incredibly powerful. And look, it's happening in various ways as we speak, right? I mean, the ability to have these artificial intelligence enhanced
Mm,
translation programs that,
right.
whether it's a device or it's your phone or with Google Translate, et cetera, ad nauseum, the ability
The, uh,
to
the
cross those
the
bridges is really becoming pretty impressive.
the Chinese Elon Musk. I don't know if you've seen that guy
Yeah,
online.
I've seen it. I've seen it.
Yeah,
Totally
that's
awesome.
amazing. Yeah. So then you said that you were with Intel. At what
Hmm.
point in your career did you start managing people? And I want to know if you were given any support training or help to step into that first leadership role.
Yeah, I really started to manage other individuals beyond, managing relationships with clients, right? Probably when I joined, well, actually, when I left Intel,
Hmm.
I had not really managed teams. I had managed projects in which contractors were put into place.
Uh-huh. Sure.
And in that regard, just like I think about it today, when you're managing a team, all you're really doing is you're managing yourself and your engagements with those individuals, right? It's a relationship management exercise. So I think that there are quite a number of sort of early in my career trainings or mentors that help to guide my philosophy around how I engage with people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Certainly, some of the old school tried and true ones were, like Dale Carnegie esque, like how to win friends and influence people kind of a thing. Which I
Yep.
think
Yep.
if you don't look at it at face value, but you actually unpack some of the philosophies behind those sorts of methodologies or philosophies, there's some really wonderful ways that
Yeah.
you can authentically engage with people.
Fully agree. We did that exact book in our company, Lunch and Learn, just a while ago. And yes, some of the examples are obviously dated to
Yeah,
getting on for
for sure.
100 years ago. But as you say, still the takeaways
But
are very
contextually, right? Exactly. The
for sure,
context behind them is really impactful, very valuable.
definitely.
I think one of the most important things that I was, sort of put across early in my career at Intel, and this is in the early 90s, was time management. And it was specifically related to a methodology that was utilized there called Franklin Covey,
Oh yeah,
which was, Stephen Covey, which is like the seven highly effective habits of highly effective people. I think it was
yeah,
seven
that's
effective
right.
habits of
Yep.
highly effective people. And that sort of methodology was really impactful for me. I'm a very disorganized person, and I'm an extrovert, and I'm very sort of like ideas oriented, which is
Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
one hand great, and on the other hand super frustrating for a lot of people, my wife included, because I'm not as adept at the detail orientation and planning aspects as I'd like to be. So having a methodology by which I prioritize things during the course of a day and refer back to them and take notes, et cetera, has
Hmm.
been really important and helpful for me, and thus allows me to effectively manage my expectations with the folks that I'm supposed to be responsible for. I think that's an incredibly important piece of getting your own what I would call BS together, which is
Uh-huh.
short for belief system. you
Okay.
know, I think that's really really helpful.
Or
So those
you
are
know,
a couple of pieces. Andy
yeah,
Grove, who was the founder and CEO of Intel when I first joined, who I was fortunate to meet a few times.
yeah.
He had a another sort of core competency for leadership within Intel that was called constructive confrontation.
Okay.
And a lot of people see it when they've visited Intel in the past, particularly when Andy was running the business,
Yeah.
and would be really taken aback by it because it seemed really well. It's in the name, right? It's confrontation, right?
Yeah.
But the constructive point is
Yeah.
the key because it's confrontation around solving a problem. It's not attacking someone individually or personally.
Right.
It's
Right.
being almost beyond assertive around disseminating and dissecting the issues
Yeah.
and finding solutions. And I think that's really, really important in terms of being an effective manager is to get everybody on the side of like attacking problems.
Fully agree. I hadn't heard of that one. I'm definitely going to look it up.
Check it out. It's pretty amazing.
Two very similar philosophies come straight to mind, which is what they do at Netflix as well with their feedback. In that they
Well, tell me
also,
about that.
sorry.
Tell me about that. What is sort of the high level of
So,
that?
so basically, they create meetings where it's a free for all for feedback, no
There you
matter
go.
whether you're their manager or not,
Perfect.
and so in certain country cultures. that's pretty overwhelming,
Totally.
um, but it has worked. Um,
Yeah.
and another kind of wrapper on that is definitely comes to mind is Gary Vaynerchuk's radical
Yep.
candor, right?
Yep. Radical
He
candor.
talks about
Exactly
that a
right.
lot, which I think is also along a similar vein. You've tied me up perfectly for the next question around getting your BS together, but in this context, it's getting stuff done,
Yes,
or another S word, which we can replace with stuff. But
for sure.
as maybe not everybody does know, but where is the getting stuff done coming from? Is actually my initials, Gordon Stewart Dudley, GSD,
Oh, cool.
and so
That's great. I love it.
so it became a bit of a nickname. GSD, get stuff done. Gordon Stewart Dudley. So that's a bit of the origin of that.
That's very
So
cool.
for you on a personal basis, on a day by day, week by week, how do you make sure that you get stuff done? And or perhaps also maybe just more reflectively over the course of your career, you have achieved more than most, or considerably more than most. And so what do you think is your special technique or thing that you do, your habit perhaps, for getting stuff done?
I've thought about this a great deal. I'm very grateful. I'm filled with a tremendous amount of gratitude for the opportunities that I've been afforded in my life, and I feel there's always a modicum or a red thread of let's call it luck, right? That's involved in a lot of the opportunities that one comes across. I also will flip that script and say that the harder I work, the luckier I get, right?
Yeah.
There's taking, I guess someone's always knocking on a door somewhere, and it's your decision as to whether or not you decide to answer that door, or you're not ready for that and you continue to focus on the path that you're on, right? And there's no right or wrong in how you respond to the knock at the door. It's all about where you feel you are and being self-aware in the time that you're present. I do think that everything happens for a reason. And I think that you need to be prepared to learn the lesson from how you sort of engage with that reason. The why. Simon Sinek calls it finding your why, right?
Yeah.
From a personal philosophy point of view, I think my early onset in my career in tech lended itself towards my proclivity to want to put acronyms on everything, right? So just like your GSD, I have acronyms for all kinds of stuff that I kind of operate by. My operating manual has a lot of acronyms. One of them around my sort of keys to leadership, and I've written about this fairly extensively on my LinkedIn profile. There's articles there. If folks ever want to check it out, it's there. But one that I've written about has sort of two iterations. It's the acronym is PEACE, PEACE, and it's in the first instance when I was thinking about my leadership sort of philosophy back in the day, and this is maybe 8-9 years ago. It stood for passion, empowerment, authenticity, celebration, and engagement. And those sort of areas, if we unpack them, are really a lot of them are about decisions that you make as a leader and how you want to project your style to organizations that you're either a part of or that you're responsible for. I think that truly showing your passion for something is incredibly important because people are attracted to people who are passionate, so long as that passion doesn't become maniacal, right? And controlling. And that leads to my second part of that acronym, which is the empowerment piece.
Hmm.
Giving the ability for your teams to make decisions, giving them the resources they require to execute against those things is a great hallmark of a great leader. Not creating a cult of personality based on passion, but showing people what great should look like, and then giving them the opportunity to live that value. And that comes to the A, which is the authenticity.
Hmm.
Being real is not everybody can do that. You have to have a lot of psychological safety, a lot of self-awareness, a lot of vulnerability, a lot of ability to tell people who you really are and be comfortable with who you really are before you can be perceived as authentic.
Mm.
But when people see it, they know it, right? So if you're
Mm.
passionate and you can empower people and you can be real, then you can see the incredible potential of the team that you're leading, and you can have the next part, which is the C, which is the celebration, right? Because people are going to get stuff done. right? If they're following someone who's passionate, they're empowered to make decisions. They feel they can bring their authentic selves to work, and be who they are because you're doing it. You're leading by example. Things are going to get done. You're going to be able to celebrate those things, and the end result of all of that is that everyone's engaged, right? And that engagement, it self perpetuates. People get really excited. They want to be around this energy, and that's, to me, that's kind of the first piece. I called it, my key to leadership was to be a hippie. I think that's how I phrased it back in the day. And I was a hippie when I was a kid. When I left university, my first 2 years, I bought a Volkswagen. I think they call it a combi. I just call it a Volkswagen, but I got a combi and I followed the Grateful Dead across the United States.
Like the camper van.
Yeah, it was a camper van. Exactly right. I've got pictures of it, man. It was a trip.
What color was it?
Metaphorically and realistically, it was a total trip. And, of course, I worked along the way, and I did carpentry, and I did construction work, and worked on a farm as a farmhand. And I followed this band around wherever they were. And sometimes they would keep going and I would stop and work for a bit. But, I think, following who you really are and following, what makes you happy. I think, Professor Galloway, Professor Prof G, Scott Galloway's got a podcast that a lot of
Okay.
people listen to.
Okay.
He's a professor of marketing, if memory serves me correctly, at NYU. And
Okay.
he thinks that following your passion is a false hope. And there are reasons behind that. And I don't necessarily differ with that. I think that following something that you really are good at and that brings you joy is a great thing to do. Passion can be scary, right? It can be a double-edged
Yeah.
sword.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think, go
when
ahead.
we think about some of the most prolifically successful people, and I won't name any of the names, but the ones who we we think they are close to genius, but they're also very close to schizophrenic or
Right.
psychotic, right? It's
Psychosis is a common trait.
like that exactly what you said. When anything taken to extreme,
Yeah,
I
precisely
think
correct.
it might actually have been the stand-up comedian Eddie Izzard who
Yeah,
terms it as being a loop where you start off being rather unintelligent, and you get more intelligent and more clever and very intelligent, super smart, world beating, world class genius, and you can very easily tip into being over that and then lose that smartness because you're ineffective of just
totally.
working on a daily basis. But you can't go the other way. You can't go from
No. It's very rare.
it's
Well, how about this? I'm not aware of it going the other way.
yeah.
And that you raise a really valuable point. And when I thought about that first acronym piece, as I went through kind of the latter stages of my career up to where I am today, one of the key elements of being an effective leader is to constantly be learning, right? Like, you're not done. You achieve a certain position or a certain role. You're not done. That's just one step on the journey, right?
For sure.
And
That
I think Satya Nadella calls it being a learn it all, right? Not a know it all. So constantly be reading, constantly be curious and learning, etc.
yeah,
I
fully.
revisited my PEACE acronym, and I didn't rejig it. I kept that core, but I
Hmm.
added one more portion to it. And on
Okay.
the passion part we were just talking about, the other P that's really important is purpose. I say that passion without purpose is simply enthusiasm, right?
I like
So,
that. I like
you
that a
know,
lot. Yes.
and you have to have purpose. And one of the things that's really exciting about having a purpose and having it be that channel for that why is that you know that birds of a feather flock together, right? And when folks get attracted to purpose, and particularly,
Hmm.
younger generations of workers now, regardless of culture, and I mean to say, whether you're, in Northeast Asia, which has a stereotype of kind of hierarchical, command and control leadership, or you're in a liberal sort of economy that has, much more sort of free for all stereotypes again. I
Hmm.
think what's fascinating, and I think particularly exacerbated by the outcome of the height of the pandemic, where everyone was ostensibly remote, was that everyone went through a similar, not the same, but a similar tinged experience.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people started to see and reevaluate their relationship with their managers, with their work, with their leaders, with their purpose. Why do I do what I do, right? And I think that's really wonderful. I think there were a lot of challenges inherent to that experience,
Yep.
but stepping back and really questioning what the purpose is for what you do on a daily basis is a
For
very
sure.
valuable moment of catharsis, right, for anybody.
Yep. Yep.
And as a
No, I
leader,
think.
you have to be willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and it continues to be an ongoing theme of the definition of work, and that is for people more experienced in their career, looking back and maybe being a bit reflective about how they worked in the past and how they might want to change, and younger people early in their career, feeling that this is all that they know, and quite normal, and a little bit perhaps confused as to why it was any different, in the past, which is kind of interesting.
It is
I want
interesting.
to touch on the different phases of your career. So you were in very large, well-established organizations. Let's call it a kind of moving up the corporate ladder, in that sense, and then you had the opportunity to found your own firm. And
Yeah.
if we talk about getting stuff done, what you have to do as a senior manager in a large, well-established organization is entirely different to what you have to do when it's your own firm. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the challenges that you had, kind of converting, or evolving into that?
Yeah, look, I alluded to it a moment ago around sort of being open to change. And change ain't easy, as we all know. You have to be willing to kind of, we mentioned learning it all, always be willing to learn. But it's also, the corollary is also true, right? Being willing to unlearn, and open to new ways of doing things. And I left Intel and actually rolled up everything I owned and moved back to China, to Shanghai, and I opened a jazz club there in 2001, which was completely insane, right? Like, I quit my corporate career at Intel after 7 years, as a pretty young man. And 7 years as a young man is like 70 years, right?
So
So I,
the jazz club was not what you did, as your side hustle, as your
no,
passion
man, I,
project.
I
That
went, I went all
was
in,
all in. You were
Yeah,
all
I
in.
went all in. I decided that I was not going to work for the man. I went back to my hippie roots, and I was like, you know what?
I'm going to
I'm
be
gonna
the man.
entertain people. I'm gonna take care of people. I'm gonna enjoy great music, and I'm gonna do it
Okay.
in a culture that is about as far away from my roots as possible. So I opened up this club on the Bund in Shanghai, and about a year into it, more or less, the precursor to COVID-19, which was called SARS,
Right.
hit China particularly
Right.
hard.
Yep.
And folks weren't hanging out in restaurants and bars during the severe acute respiratory syndrome period. So it crushed my business. And I didn't want to lose the space that I had. So I continued to look for work, and I got a job at Microsoft. Ergo, my work at Microsoft became a means to, of course, become gainfully employed again and get my own personal life together,
Hmm.
um, but also to pay the rent for the bar
Right.
because I didn't want to lose it. So it did in turn become a side hustle ultimately.
I see. Okay.
But there was a period of about a year and a half where, if it hadn't been for SARS, maybe I'd be running a club. I don't know. But as relates to the business that you mentioned in the preamble to us coming onto this call, which was an executive search and business advisory firm that I founded with a buddy of mine, which was called Reed Hamilton. No points for creativity on coming up with a double hyphenated professional services term. Like everybody else, right? Russell Reynolds, Spencer Stewart, Korn Ferry, Egon Zender. Like, keep going. I took my
But
middle
but
name
but
and
not
his middle name.
but
Go
not
ahead.
RDI. But not
Not
RDI.
REI, no. But hey, present company not inclusive, right? But I took my middle name and his middle name, and the URL was available, so it seemed venerable and
Yep.
had credibility, and we went for it. It was, Gordon, I was fighting a very significant battle inside at the time at SAP. Where I was the first vice president for cloud computing at the company in Asia Pacific, and the reason behind that, and it might sound crazy to folks who follow SAP today, they had not gone through the iterations of acquisitions that they are famous for today, like Success
Okay.
Factors and Concur and all these amazing companies they acquired and did a great job of integrating.
Mm.
At that time, it was really nascent, and cloud computing was relatively nascent, so to speak. And so I was banging my head against the wall, both trying to educate the marketplace around what software as a service and cloud computing was and is, but
Hmm.
also perhaps more frustrating and emblematic of the times, not an indictment against SAP's culture, was the fact that I was constantly trying to evangelize internally as well. So I spent probably 80% of my time trying to convince and educate the internal organization around what it was about,
Okay.
more so than I was really outside educating the market. And what I think
Right.
that's why I think that's interesting and germane to your question is the fact that I was ostensibly operating a startup inside of a large organization.
Okay.
So the upshot of that, or I guess the additional pro of that kind of an exercise, is that I also was able to glean access to the resources that are inherent in a larger organization. So it wasn't the same thing, which I quickly learned on multiple occasions, as parachuting with your own parachute, right? And so I had a predisposition, having done the jazz club and having run, let's call it startups inside of an organization, to being susceptible to the idea that we could do something unique
Hmm. Hmm.
outside, right, on our
Sure.
own. And so my partner at the time, this gentleman, Jason Reed Wagner, ergo the name Reed Hamilton,
Hmm.
decided that, between my experience kind of helping United States, historically European or United States-based tech firms expand and build teams, as well as his experience in financial services, we could start something really unique. So we went out and tried this thing, and it did scale. I mean, we were able to go, upwards of 20 plus associates in Singapore and Hong Kong. My curiosity around venture capital and private equity was really where I gained a lot of traction. So I took my experience in building go to market for large companies, had seen what had worked. I had helped launch Salesforce.com in North Asia. I opened their offices in Hong Kong and China before joining SAP. And then SAP's cloud business, I felt particular sort of, I guess, acumen towards being able to do that. And so I targeted PE and VC firms to help them build strategy around their go to market in their portfolio companies. And then the trick was, or I shouldn't say trick because that sounds nefarious. The added value of that exercise was that once we assessed the veracity of the strategy, it was about,
Hmm.
do you have the right team in place to execute that strategy? Because otherwise it's just PowerPoint. And
Yep.
so we got into the headhunting side of it. And that experience, Gordon, quite frankly, building that business on top of the teams that I had been fortunate to build in the other businesses I just mentioned, really helped me propel my career forward, because I realized that it wasn't about me anymore, right? It was all about the talent, all about the team, all about the people. It has very little to do with who you are, other than your ability to harness the mind share and the resources and then move stuff out of the way and let those people shine. That's how you become successful as a leader.
Thank you. I'm sure that everybody listening will really be able to get some insights out of that, and that leads me perfectly to the next question: is that from getting stuff done yourself, essentially, single contributor, individual contributor, high achiever, to then leading others, where your result is the other people's output, the other people's work, to then the next level, which is a leader of leaders, where you have to, where your evaluation, your performance is based on the ability of others to get the best out of others, which is another whole step.
Yeah.
So, what is it that's fundamentally different about leading others to leading leaders for you?
Look, I think there's a couple of key elements. One of them is, it sounds so cliche, but the buck does stop with you. So, having sort of a personal philosophy of accountability and ownership is really, really important. And that's not to be confused with, some people might take it to the extreme, which is, control. It's not about
Hmm.
control. It's
Hmm.
about giving up control. It's about delegation. It's about,
Yep.
you know, letting people move and realizing the potential in people. My dear departed old man, who was ostensibly a career Marine in the United States Marine Corps, was very instructive with me when I was a kid, that anybody could be a leader. It was about providing the opportunity for those folks to really tap into their leadership potential,
Mm-hmm.
and your ability to instruct someone or teach someone how to be a leader. It starts with your own self-awareness, right? And trying to be as humble, leading with humility is really, really critical. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the most key elements to success as a leader of leaders is, and again, this sounds so cliche and I'm like Captain Obvious, but leadership by example is unbelievably important.
Okay.
If you don't do yourself what you're asking your teams to do, you aren't expressing true authenticity, and you're not going to be able to get the results that you want. Are you in the field meeting with customers? Are you personally taking classes and showing people that you're willing to be constantly learning? Are you working as hard as you're asking your people to work? Are you making decisions? You have
Yeah.
to be very, very focused on that. And I was alluding to this, and I got sidetracked on my own diatribe, but particularly in a remote environment, open, transparent communication is so important.
Yeah.
Constantly being open and able to communicate. And if something's bad, if something's not what you had hoped it would be, express very clearly what the situation is. And then going back to my comment about Intel back in the day, it's that constructive confrontation. It's like, hey, Gordon, when we last met, we talked about this desired outcome, this goal that we had, and we haven't been able to achieve it. Let's go back and look at this thing together and figure out, was that even the right goal? I mean, what was the outcome we were actually trying to get to? And let's figure out, if we agree to that, like, let's figure out how we can do it together. And if
Yeah.
the team's
Yeah.
having challenges, like, roll up your sleeves, get involved and own it,
Yeah,
you know?
I fully agree, and this is actually a theme which comes up a lot with my clients when we're talking about leadership roles, executive level, even team leader positions, and the company is always seeking for someone who's hands on in the sense of, like, exactly like you said, not controlling and doing it all, like otherwise not everything is going to get done, because no one person can do it all, but
Certainly.
still very much being at on the front line, aware of what the reality is. And maybe that's why I love that series. What is it called? Undercover CEO.
Yeah, I love that too, man. It's such a great show.
You know, because you just see the CEO themselves often going through a journey of realizing what it's really like for their frontline
100%.
staff,
It's
where
so important, man.
clearly for years up in corporate in the HQ, which might be not only geographically distant, but literally situationally entirely different. That can
Totally
be
agree.
really powerful. Okay, I want to now go from the very high level that we've been at now down to the very practical and the day to day. I want to hear a little bit about what a typical day for you looks like. Maybe share some of the things which you consider to be important within your day to get done.
Look, my anyone who follows me on LinkedIn will know that I have almost like an obsessive compulsive disorder with posting things that I find interesting, and the sort of the upstream of that outcome, and the reason that I do that is that I'm trying to show the organization that I'm a part of, or the people that are within my network, or the folks that I'm directly responsible for, that I'm out there listening to what's going on across a huge, vast ocean of areas that I'm interested in, or areas that are germane or relevant to the business that I'm in. And the reason I say that is because it goes back to that adage that I attributed to Satya Nadella, right? Being a learn it all. Every morning when I wake up, the very first thing I do, first of all, I have a moment, where I kind of think about my day, and people call that, whatever they call it, right? Like awareness or presence, or there's a whole litany of ways people sort of articulate that. I just call it a moment of
Mindfulness.
like
Yeah.
contemplation, like I've just come
Okay.
out of a deep sleep. What's up? How am I feeling? How am I doing? So I kind of get my stuff together, as it were, so
Okay.
that I can get
Yep.
stuff done.
Hmm. Hmm.
Post that and some stretching, because I'm getting older. I I start reading. And there are a numerous amount of sources that I go to first thing in the morning. What I don't do is check my email. I don't check my email. I don't look at my Slack. I don't look at my texts or whatever. First thing I do is I read. I read what's happened in the world. I read some particular sorts of feeds that I'm interested in, and I kind of get an assessment of what the day's looking like from that point of view, or what things are interesting to me. And those might be little things that maybe they inspire me for a moment. Once I kind of gather those things, I then post some of the things that I found particularly interesting. If for no other reason than selfishly, I go back and refer to them during the course of the day. And then oddly, I'm still one of these weird dudes who write stuff down in a planner. So I do prioritize my day, and kind of put down the things that I want to do. That goes back to that Franklin Covey day planner crap that got implanted into my deep psyche when I was younger in my
Mm-hmm.
career. And then I, start my day. I check my email. I go through my plans for the day, and I start to go through my meetings and reach out to people. That's kind of the career side. I will say that after I've gotten up and I've read and I've started to post some things and I make my coffee, the very next thing that I do is I put some jazz on the radio and I go wake up my kids and I get them ready for school and I make their breakfast and send them out the door. I'm very blessed and very fortunate that I'm in a job that is 100% remote. And so by design, I work from home. That's not to say that that's better or worse than anyone else's job. It's a personal decision around how I'm productive. And I am very filled with a great deal of gratitude that I'm able to spend an inordinate amount of time with my children and my wife. Whereas historically in my career, as I was going up that ladder, I traveled every single week, 52 weeks a year. I think probably the first 6 to 8 years of my kids' lives, I was not present. I was on an airplane and I was in a hotel room or I was in a boardroom. And those are hard yards. And everyone's got to kind of go through their own journey. Not saying that my journey was any harder or worse than anybody else's, but for me, the pain of not being around my kids, particularly, has informed the direction that I've taken my career as it is today, which is one
Okay.
wherein I own my time.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned through these brief 50 years on planet Earth is that time is the ultimate. Time is the ultimate sort of value,
Right. No,
and
fully.
how you spend it is indicative of who you are as a person.
A considerable amount of time out there traveling, always, in the office or out and about wherever that might be. And now a fully remote, primarily home based working environment. How is that for you? And is there anything that you've done to ensure that you can be as productive as you want to be?
Yeah, look, I that sort of culture of accountability is a really critical aspect. Doing what you say you're going to do. There's a methodology I think that's gotten a lot of traction in the startup community, certainly, and certainly now I think in larger corporations as well, called OKRs, right? Objectives and key results.
Right.
And beyond the more mainstream aspect of management by objective, right? The MBO structure. Now there's OKRs. I think however you want to frame it. Again, that leadership by example scenario, which is to say, I know
Mm-hmm.
that I'm responsible for some outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as I'm not by any means necessary, right? Not the ends justify the means per se, because there has to be a lot of integrity and honesty and forthrightness and communication, all those different things that we mentioned earlier, values. But if I'm able to deliver on the experience that is required to ensure that my team is well looked after, has the psychological safety and the environment and the resources they require to get their jobs done, i.e., to deliver results that are commensurate with their position, then I'm doing the right thing. If that means that I have to get everybody together for the purposes of building morale, or
Mm-hmm.
because some one-on-one time is going to add value to this person's experience and mine,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then that's what I need to do. I will say, at the risk of kind of going against what I just shared, that I do think there's a hell of a lot of value in balance. And that is to say that there's just as much power in getting folks together and being present with one another physically as there is in your ability to, deftly remotely manage people with aplomb, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Mm-hmm.
a
Sure.
huge amount of impact in physical proximity. So it's about finding balance, man. I mean, I think as much as it is about, I mentioned earlier, how you value your time and how you spend it, it's also very important to constantly strive for balance in your life.
Mm.
And that means not being extreme in one degree or the other.
Yeah. I mean, in that aspect, I must say I do really still struggle with, is balance compartmentalization or is
Yeah.
it integration?
Yep. That's
Because
a great way to look at it.
for me, like if I compartmentalize, aka get to the office by a certain time and make a
Yeah.
schedule and stick to that, I'm very aware of what I've got to get done in a certain time, and I work towards a deadline. At the same time, integrating in the sense of more naturally being flexible with where I'm working and the schedule, and realizing that things I have to do, like I don't have to have a team meeting at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning just because it's the first moment of the working week.
Yeah.
If actually that's a very important time for my kids or for my team members, that so they can't be part of that. So
That's right.
I'm still really struggling with that in terms of what's ultimately best.
Yep.
And maybe it's not always one way. Maybe at certain times it's one way, and certain times it's the other way.
Yeah, man. I look, the yin of balance reflects the yang of flexibility. So we live in a volatile and uncertain world, constantly being disrupted. So the very idea that you are confronted by that friction is reflective of the fact that you're actually finding balance, right? Because it can't be one way or the other. Like you can't be peace, love, and harmony on a daily basis because that's not what life is. And you can't be regimental and ultra orthodox every day because that's not what life is. It's about how do we, in the moment, provide the right experience, the right model to maximize that moment to full potential for everyone who's
Yeah,
involved in that moment. And maybe
yeah,
that's to your point. Like if 9 a.m. is for your kids and your wife and your coffee or whatever it is, that's important. And I will say this too. I think being a leader who knows that sometimes you need to sacrifice for others is important, but being a leader who also knows that you have to take care of yourself is really important. Because again, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not showing others that it's okay for them to take care of themselves, and you're running into a spiral of diminishing
yeah.
returns very, very quickly.
You know what? One of my colleagues asked me this week. It was my birthday's in the last week of December, and so we were talking
Right
about
on.
what I got for my birthday. And she asked, "Oh, what did you get for yourself?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "Oh, I always make sure on my birthday that I get something for myself."
Awesome.
And I actually think that that really resonated with me. Like actually, what is it? People can have the best intentions of what they buy for you for your birthday, and they might
That's right.
buy what you ask, but often presents are you don't choose them. And so I thought that's a really interesting kind of concept, because sometimes, especially as parents, we are just giving all that we can,
That's right.
and self-care is important, and life is long, and we've got to do this sustainably, whether that's parenting or work, or whatever it might be. And so I think that is a really good takeaway. It caught me off guard because I hadn't thought about it, and actually thought, yeah, actually perhaps I should do something.
You
It's
absolutely should.
yeah, it's
You
that.
take that note and remember it, mate.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to learn that lesson myself. I did it this year because last year I turned 50, and on my actual birthday itself, I took off and went into the bush here in Australia for a 7 day sort of camping and detox kind of trip
Okay.
by myself. And my wife was like, "Wow, you're leaving me and the kids on your 50th birthday and spending 7 days, away in the bush." And I said, "Yeah, I need it." and this is
Yeah.
how I'm going to
Yeah.
remember my 50th. Not by going out on a lashing bender or a boys' weekend or whatever. I went off on my own, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you should give
There
yourself a
is.
gift every once.
Well, also there is another Japanese methodology, which is one at least one time per year, do something which is life changing. So at
Love it.
least once a year, do something which is really far out of your comfort zone. Right? It's a bit different to giving yourself what you want, treating yourself, but I
For sure.
also like fully, fully agree to that. I think it's so easy to just keep your head down, keep going, keep striving, and but then you lose sight of the bigger picture. So I also think that's a good thing. I mean, New Year's resolutions are nice and all, but
Yeah.
at a level above that, right?
I think you're right. I think pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. There's a my family, which is a historically a Scottish family. The Ferguson family has their motto, right? In Latin, it's "Dulcius ex aspirus," which means sweeter after difficulty. And I feel very passionately that some of the best things in life come from adversity. Through difficult situations, or putting
For sure.
yourself into an uncomfortable situation. Some of the best things that can possibly happen in your life or
Mm,
in your mental evolution come from that.
for
And
sure.
I totally agree with what you've just said. I think that's incredibly valuable. Leadership and learning are indispensable to one another. That's a quote from John F. Kennedy. So yeah, there you go.
I think on that note, it's a fantastic place to pause. I wish we could talk more, but I think we've covered a lot. I hope that everybody listening, if this is the first episode that you've come across, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it will inspire you to go and check out the previous episodes that we've been putting out. I will continue to endeavor to bring fantastic guests, just like Charles, who I've had the pleasure of talking with today about such a wide range of topics. I really hope that people can have some takeaways into their own lives
Absolutely.
and careers, especially at this start of the year when it's a great time to look a bit more long term about what we're doing. So, Charles, thanks so much for sharing all of your insights today.
Absolute pleasure, my friend. It's always great to meet with you. And yeah, let's stay in touch. See how we go.
All right, so I'm going to wrap it up there, and thank you everybody for listening or watching this episode. If you would like to keep in touch and up to date with the weekly episodes as they come out, please do hit subscribe so that you will get them automatically coming to you on whatever platform you are listening to the or watching the Get Stuff Done podcast. Once again, thank you for all your support and look forward to seeing you again in the next episode. Take care.